Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to Critica NYC. I'm your host, Raquel Batista. And this week, we have two really wonderful guests. We are in the spirit of community and gratitude. Many of us will be celebrating Thanksgiving this Thursday, figuring out our dinner plans, if we're going to be seeing family members or not, whether some family will be Zooming in or using some other form of technology to gather. We're here today to talk about the essential work of our community-based organizations that are helping to feed families, thousands of families throughout New York City through this pandemic, through this Thanksgiving, and who have been there really at every moment of crisis for our communities. Today we have Maria Lizardo, who is the Executive Director of the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. And we also have Aldrin Bonilla, who is the former Deputy Borough President of Manhattan and now Executive Vice President at the Fund for the City of New York. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
This is really great. I'm really excited.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Aldrin. I'm really excited about having you guys here with us today. I know, we've been through a lot really in the last week between the closing of the New York City public schools. Everyone is now remote again. We're starting to see infection numbers starting to go up again. And, we're finally moving officially into the transition with the president, right? Trump has already given the green light to do the transition with Biden. So, many of us are really happy to see that happening. Please, I would love to hear a little bit from both of you in terms of how you're seeing the moment right now. And then we can, have go deep right into what these last several weeks are going to be looking like for our communities. So Maria, please start.
Sure. I mean, definitely it's been a challenging 37 weeks since we closed our doors at NMIC. And in terms of what's to come, definitely a lot of challenges, but there's also a sense of excitement as we see a change in leadership at the federal level. And then we're looking forward to 2021, where we will also see a lot of changes in leadership at the city level. And I know we're going to dive into more other things, so I'll fill in more stuff as we have a conversation.
Sure. Okay. Aldrin?
Yeah, hope you guys can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay. So first I want to thank you, Raquel, for the invitation. I want to thank Atlanta, Georgia, Buckhead, Frontline Committee, everybody doing their thing in this last election and in the re-election, right? The special election coming up. And in terms of what you've mentioned, this is a time where, while we can celebrate the ascertainment of the election, right? That's a word everybody's now familiar with. There's still the question of 75 million so people who voted for the current president, who, of that number, a good 60% believed the election was stolen, or like that he really won. So, the months and years ahead are going to be challenging beyond just COVID, right? Even after we get over COVID, we're going to have some serious challenges.
Yes, no, agreed, Aldrin. There's definitely going to be a lot for us to deal with at the national level and at the local level. I also, wanted to take a moment, right? Because as we're recognizing the fact that we're having leadership changes and many things are happening today, early this morning, we got the news that Mayor David Dinkins passed away. And, we've been seeing a lot of different articles and stories about him and how especially meaningful his work has been in the Latino community and especially in the Dominican community. I know I've heard many stories in the past from people like Moises Perez when with the founding of Alianza Dominicana, I believe like one of the first funding really came from Mayor David Dinkins. A lot of our leaders currently, I know Aldrin, you yourself have some stories about your connections with Mayor Dinkins. And also, I also wanted to mention that the executive producer of our show and director of El Barrio Firehouse for the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, Zenaida Mendez, also had a very close relationship with Mayor Dinkins. And we have a picture of her of when she first met with him and started working with him back in 1986. And so, we do want to take a moment to recognize what he meant for Dominicans, for people of color, being the only Black mayor ever elected to New York City government, how important he has been to us. Aldrin, you'd like to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, today our mayor, 106th Mayor David Dinkins, joins his beautiful bride, right? He would always call Joyce Dinkins his bride, right? In passing, right? I think what you mentioned, look, Mayor Dinkins is someone that even in his obituary, in today's New York Times obituary, got it horribly wrong, right? It was horrific in terms of what they decided to focus on, in terms of Crown Heights and crime. David Dinkins is someone whose mayorship was only 4 years, but you would think it was 12 years in terms of impact, right? Under this mayorship is where beacon schools were created, right? So beacon schools were institutionalized under this mayor. This mayor is the one responsible for creating the Economic Development Corporation, which incentivized and incubated hundreds of new companies in New York City. This is the mayor that signed the contract with Disney World to come to 42nd Street, to Times Square, before Giuliani, although he doesn't get credit for that. This is the mayor that signed the licensing agreement with Arthur Ashe Stadium in terms of the U.S. tennis, and from the fees and the revenue from the U.S. tennis competition that's held here is even more to the city coffers than what Yankee Stadium pays. That's how great of a deal the mayor negotiated around tennis. So, this is a mayor who's done so much in terms of reducing crime. Safe City, Safe Streets wouldn't have happened without his relationship with Bill Clinton, whose presidency overlapped by a couple of years with this mayor. And I wouldn't have worked with Nelson Mandela were not for this mayor, who took a delegation of young people to South Africa and exposed the whole generation of people to the post-apartheid and anti-apartheid movement. So I owe him a personal debt of gratitude to exposing me to the African National Congress, and hence to Nelson Mandela, who I wound up working for a period of 2 years.
Thank you so much, Aldrin, for sharing that. Maria, would you like to comment?
Sure. This is the mayor that invested and believed in youth and children. And the Department of Youth and Community Development is his legacy. Beacon schools are his legacy. The fact that we have after school programming and such investments in children is part of his legacy. So I, for one, will forever be grateful because I benefited from that. And thousands of kids have benefited from his investment and his belief that when you invest in children, you invest in our future. And Mayor Dinkins, rest in power. You will forever be remembered.
Thank you so much for that, Maria. And that really is, a wonderful segue to, the topic that we really want to talk about, which is supporting our frontline community organizations. Community organizations like the Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, that while you may not be able to have your doors open for anyone to walk in to receive services, you're still out there providing for the community and making yourselves available for an array of issues, from offering food and other services, helping domestic violence survivors during this pandemic, which has been particularly tough, and also offering what you can for our children. Can you talk a little bit about what has that experience been like? What kind of support have you been getting from the city and from the state? And what kind of things do we really need to be looking at in terms of holding our government accountable? I know one of the issues that a lot of people were out today marching is the issue of undocumented immigrants not being able to access many of the programs or assistance that's available to other residents. I know there are some things that people can access, other things that they cannot, when it comes especially to like issues like unemployment, and things like that. I would love to hear more from you, your thoughts on that and how all of this has impacted NYMIC.
Sure. So NYMIC was founded 41 years ago as a legal services organization focused on tenants' rights. Fast forward 41 years, we're a settlement house, meaning that we're really neighborhood based, that it is about having our community and being close to them. And our work impacts the entire family, or as we say, from twinkle to wrinkle. So when we prevent an eviction, it impacts everyone in the household. The baby that was born yesterday, the abuela that's been living there, because she's the primary caretaker. So our work has severely been impacted from COVID because we were forced to shift from this neighborhood-based model where we have an open door and people come in and can ask 1,000,001 questions and we direct them to the proper service, to one that is now virtual. We've also gone from being a legal services provider, providing case management, adult education services, to doing emergency services. The food insecurity has increased tremendously. And where we once had a food pantry that was once a month in a truck, now we're doing it twice a month. We're also seeing the economic pressures that our families are under. Many have lost their jobs, particularly during the first shutdown, where restaurants and beauty salons and nail salons were shut down. And so we had to shift our programming, and we were able to distribute about $400,000 in emergency funds. And that included folks who were undocumented, who were particularly impacted by the pandemic. Now all our services are virtual. And so we are running classes. Like, we have 76 students enrolled in our English as a second language class. We've provided services to over 300 victims of domestic violence. We've provided food since May 8th that we started our food pantry twice a month. We've provided over 25,000 pounds of food. We're even giving out pet food because some families, they make a choice. Do they feed themselves or do they feed their dog or their cat? And so we've partnered with the ASPCA, with the Hunger Pet Project, and we also have dog and cat food available for folks. So we've really shifted our programming, and it's been really challenging because we know that this has severe economic impacts on both the city and the state. And guess what? The first budget cuts usually happen to the nonprofit sector. And guess what? The nonprofit sector primarily serves Black and Brown communities. The nonprofit sector, 80% of our employees are women, and over 50% are people of color. And guess what? We are also big contributors to the city. We contribute over $77 billion to the economy. 18% of New York City's workforce are nonprofit employees. So we are a player, yet when it comes time to make decisions, we're the first ones to be cut. But guess what? We were essential before COVID. We have been essential during COVID. And post-COVID, we will be key to the recovery of New York City and New York State. We will be the ones in the forefront getting people back to work. We will be the ones on the forefront preventing evictions. We haven't seen the tidal wave of evictions. We haven't seen that yet, but we will be there to provide services to folks. Historically, we've been underfunded. We get paid 80 cents on the dollar. And now I'm afraid that as we move forward, we'll get paid even less. And so we'll have less resources but there will be even more demand for the essential services that we provide.
Maria, you made an interesting point when we were first logging on about some of the funds are being held back. Can you talk a little bit about that and what's happening there?
Sure. So New York State, under the leadership of Governor Cuomo and several executive orders, has been withholding 20% of state contracts, meaning that on any state contract, we are not getting paid for 20%. Right now, the state owes NIMIC $1.2 million, which is huge. I mean, we have to pay our staff, we have to pay insurance, we still have to pay our light bill. We still have a lot of bills that we need to cover. Yet the state is holding 20% of our funds. And so it's been very challenging to meet cash, to meet payroll, to have cash on hand, to pay all our bills. And so I beg the state to release these funds, because just as hospitals and we are essential. We are helping New Yorkers and some of the most vulnerable populations who need our services.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Maria. I think that, as we're thinking about, I know a lot of people right now are thinking about how can I support local organizations? How do we give? Who do we give to? And one of the things that we will be showing is a list of a variety of essential community organizations. It's only some, it's not all of them, but we compiled a list for our viewers of organizations, 2 from each borough, that if you have the capacity of being able to give and you're considering, making a contribution, these are organizations that you can potentially give to. We have in the Bronx Works and POTS, the Bronx, both have food pantries. In Brooklyn, we have Southside United HTFC and Los Sures and Make the Road by Walking New York City. We also have in Manhattan, Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation and the West Side Campaign Against Hunger, who also supports numerous food pantries like NIMICS and the Dominican Women's Development Center. And then we have in Queens, the Neighborhood Housing Services of Queens, CDC. They have an interesting program where you can adopt a family and to help feed your neighbors. And you can give whatever level you'd like, and you can help a family for up to a month or longer. There's also Love Wins Food Pantry, and they have a GoFundMe page where you can go and make a contribution there. And then we have in Staten Island, Cabrini Immigrant Services of New York City and La Colmena. And I want to thank, all my friends on my Facebook page that helped to compile this list. And then we also have a few citywide organizations like Catholic Charities and the Food Bank of New York City. And also you can dial 311 if you're having an emergency and you need food assistance. You can contact the city to help you identify a food pantry or to get food to you. So we definitely wanted to get that information out there. These are organizations that people can give to, but also contact if you need help. And now, I'd like to turn it to Aldrin, who he was formerly a Manhattan Borough Deputy President of Manhattan, and now he's at the Fund for the City of New York. I would love to hear from you, your perspective on how these issues have been handled to help support our community organizations, and what views you have in terms of what the city and the state could be doing more, and hopefully also the federal government as we come into 2021.
Yes. Just so to put it a little bit in perspective, I mean, Maria gave some really key data points about the primacy of the nonprofit community. So we're talking about the nonprofit sector. Maria mentioned is about $78 billion in terms of revenue for the city. It's about 680,000 employees, which is about 18% of the workforce for New York City. And approximately, that's 10% of New York City's GDP, approximately, right? And these are nonprofit employees that themselves sometimes are 1 or 2 paychecks away from missing bills and from poverty and from all the other trials and tribulations that they help community with, right? So what has been most ravaged? What sector has been most ravaged by COVID, right? We went from a loss of 920,000 jobs from March till June. We've recovered about 300,000 of those jobs, but there's still like about 650,000 people without work. Think about the tourism sector and its ancillary and multiplying jobs, right, that they affect. So the tourism sector, last year, New York City had the fortune of having 67 million tourists, 67 million tourists, which was around $45 billion of revenue. The nonprofit sector, 77 billion, tourism, 45 billion, with about 300,000, 350,000 jobs. The nonprofit sector, around 680,000. But you get what I'm saying. The tourism sector has all but vanished. So that's about $45 billion gone. It's about 350,000 jobs gone for the moment. And these are jobs in the service sector primarily, but also retail. You're talking about when you're in a food pantry or you're on a food line, a food distribution line. You're talking about people who were formerly maybe bouncers in nightclubs. You're talking about bartenders, waitresses, waiters. You're talking about folks that were DJs. You're talking about people who were, doing all these type of things in that sector, the restaurant, retail industry, retail, fashion, marketing, all these types of sectors. So that's the people that have joined the food line, right? People in their 20s, people 18, 19, in their 20s, in their early 30s, who've never ever been food insecure in that sense, and who are young, who can work, but whose jobs have disappeared for the moment under COVID. And then you're talking about another sector of individuals, primarily about 72% of which are comprised by women, who have disproportionately lost their employment under COVID. So while young people under the age of 30 have been disproportionately affected by losing their jobs through COVID, women also, the different age ranges have disproportionately lost their job from COVID. And these are some of the people that we're seeing on the food lines and pantries who have traditionally not been there. Now, in terms of, what government can do, and Maria, hinted at this. Number one, this is no time for government to have austerity measures or be austere with the nonprofit sector, right? I already mentioned tourism; they're not going to come back for a while. But the nonprofit employees, they live, they work, they pay taxes, they consume here in New York City, and the people that they serve, which are in greater need than ever, are right here in New York City. So it's like a virtuous cycle to fund nonprofits, fund them adequately, don't come back, in fact, add more, because this is how we get out of the crises that we're in a way that we keep the people, sustained for better times when the employment does come back. So I agree with Maria. I mean, the notion, and that's why the Fund for the City of New York, where I'm at now, one of our bread and butter programs have been the cash flow loan programs, because the city and state are notoriously people who pay, not on time. Imagine running a business and you've completed the services. I've painted your house. Here you have a roof, but I'll pay you in 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean you pay me? I got costs, I got personnel expenses, I got vendor expenses. That's absurd that the nonprofit sector is subsidizing government. So that's unacceptable. It should not be a matter of delaying payment. It should be a matter of advancing payment. It shouldn't be a matter of cutting funding. It should be a matter of expanding funding, because it makes prudent sense, right? Because the base that's being uplifted are New York City residents, taxpayers. So that's really the focus that we should have now. In terms of the nonprofit sector, we can discuss other sectors, construction, financial, real estate, and others. But the nonprofit sector in particular, there is no New York City recovery without the nonprofit sector right now being strengthened. And certainly there's no way to deal with equity issues without strengthening the nonprofit sector, because the nonprofit sector is probably one of the few sectors that have equity foremost in their mission and in the vision. And nonprofit, we got our problems. Don't get me wrong. We got racial reckoning. We got diversity and inclusion issues. There's all kinds of issues in nonprofit. But in terms of all the sectors that you could conceivably think of that are dealing with that you need full and whole as we engage in the recovery, is the nonprofit sector.
Thank you so much for that, Aldrin. And I, absolutely agree with everything that you've said. I would say outside of, our frontline workers in the hospitals and in the medical field that are providing services to people who are getting sick and dealing with this virus, I would say next to that would be our nonprofit folks, the people who are there to really hold our hands, quite essentially throughout this pandemic, and helping to provide really basic services when it comes to, food and, having a home. But, also I'd like, Aldrin, if you can also talk a little bit about, it's kind of a little connected to this issue of the digital divide. Because I know that in the past, when you were at the Fund for the City of New York many, many years ago, I remember you were doing work on technology and helping to bridge the digital divide. And here we are in 2020, again, still dealing with this issue, especially with having all these children now going remote, and not everyone has a computer, not everyone has an iPad, not everyone has internet. And the mayor did make an announcement about a deal, an agreement that was made with Verizon on, helping folks get access to technology. Would you be able to comment a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, it's a shame. It's a real embarrassment. It's a real blight on who we are in New York City that in 2020, the internet, the disconnectivity of vast swaths of our communities is still the same that it was 10, 15 years ago. Now that you bring learning and schooling experience home, right, that this virtual and remote learning, besides all the other challenges young people have to deal with, and sometimes in overcrowded households with rent burdens and food insecurity, and multiple family members having to conduct business in the household, which can make people go mad. The internet connectivity, we realize, is not broadband, it's not fast enough. Many corporations have been gouging our communities with fees and service, and not providing the highest level of service delivery. So, and then when the schools, when DOE and the mayor's office try to essentially have deals with these different Optimum and these different corporations, they played hardball in the sense that, if families had arrears, that became an issue as to whether you were going to provide the internet free or low cost, where it should be free or low cost, period, because of the concession agreements that these corporations have in New York City to be able to, conduct business. Then in terms of the equipment that folks have, for example, you have all these iPads and laptops in schools, but you come to find out, we did a survey, and I actually did some programming around this in terms of getting them out. You have schools that have maybe 30, 50 iPads that are not distributed to students because somehow, some way, they don't have the lightning cord charger. It broke, or it's missing, so something that is as simple as $12 is keeping a $600 or $400 appliance for getting into someone's home to help a child. So that's ass backwards. It can't get any more ass backwards than New York City in 2020, thinking that we all what we think we are, and we can't get simple interconnectivity, high-speed broadband into people's homes. It's really causing this students who don't even want to go to class for a variety of reasons, right? But one reason is it's highly embarrassing, even as adults, right? For us as adults, right? To be doing what we do, these things on Zoom and on StreamYard, whatever we're using, and we get disconnected or it freezes. or with that's kind of like so I think this has peeled back class, right? It's peeled back, how internet connectivity is kind of been, apportioned out throughout New York City in a very racialized way as well, in terms of the last mile, right? The connectivity, and in public housing or in other regards is just not there, and it's a real embarrassment for New York City in 2020. As you mentioned, I worked on some of these issues almost like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that vast advancements have been made, but while we have more shiny objects, the shiny objects don't necessarily mean that our children have better experiences with interconnectivity.
And can I also add, we've
Yes.
seen also in the nonprofit sector, our work is in person. And when you get paid 80 cents on the dollar, you don't have extra money to invest in your IT infrastructure. So once we had to move remote, we were like, holy crap, we have staff who don't have desktops at home or laptops. So we've had to make major investment in equipment and making sure that our staff has the right access to things they need so they can work remotely and continue to provide services. We've had staff who didn't have internet at home, so we've had to walk them through that process. So even in the nonprofit sector, we're seeing that digital divide, and we're seeing the need to invest in this. And moving forward, we can see a blended model of service delivery, and we have to be ready for what's next for us.
So can you talk a little bit more about what that blended model would look like?
Well, we don't know it yet, but we can definitely foresee, for example, for our adult literacy classes, there are folks who need to come in person. That is the best way that they're going to learn. But for some folks, remote does work because they don't have to commute to our office to take the classes. They can do it at home, so it cuts on the commuting time. So I think there will be a blended model where we will work with folks with where they're at and be a lot more flexible. So we are looking at how do we invest even more in technology so we could do more remote learning, so we can accommodate the folks who can come in person and accommodate those who want to learn remote and still want to come to class and still want to get their diplomas.
Yeah. So Maria, what would you say? I mean, I know everything has been challenging, right? This whole time has been challenging, but what has been the most challenging experience of this challenge?
Dios mío. I think the most challenging was closing our doors on March 13th and not knowing what was going to happen on March 16th. We only had a few days to plan. And we had to take our entire operations, 120 staff that serves 14,000 community members a year through our 4 offices, and move everything remote. That was the biggest thing. We worked nonstop just to figure out our operations, how to keep staff engaged, how do we continue to provide services. So now we have a centralized intake line. How do we do the food pantry? How do we distribute $400,000 without having to send checks or go into the office and do these things? So just figuring out the entire workload for every single program that we have has been the most challenging. And the other piece is, how do we maintain our connection to people, to our staff, to our community members? Because our work, it's about that human connection. It's about seeing people. It's about talking to people. It's about getting to see what they need and then helping them figure it out and connecting them. And it's hard to do it remotely. So that has also been a challenge. How do we remain engaged, and how do we continue in this work and keep people's spirits up and keep the momentum going? Because we're in it for the long haul. Even though we're seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel with the talks of the vaccine, we're still not there.
Yeah. So we have the graphics, Maria, that you sent us on if folks want to contact NYMIC and how they can contact them. If we can see that, can you just take us through this for us?
Sure. So we have our central hotline, which is 929-415-8745. And we've designated days and times that folks can call for the different services they may need. So for example, housing, if you have eviction problems, repairs, or landlord harassment, it's on Wednesdays between 9 and 1. Food pantry, we do our food pantry registration on Tuesdays between 12 and 2. And for that, you can also go on our website, which is www.nmic.org to register for our food pantry. Unemployment benefits, that was unemployment is new to us. We've never done unemployment assistance. But during COVID, we had to train our staff on how to do unemployment because that was the number one need as people were losing their jobs. They needed assistance to walk them through the process. So we do all benefits on Mondays and Thursdays between 9 and 12. Immigration, that's picking up in terms of folks who are coming in and calling in for assistance. Mondays from 9 to 12. Domestic violence, every weekday, Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. And we do social and legal services. Adult education on Wednesdays between 9 and 5. And then career services. We're still training folks, particularly in the security field that has been very hot during the pandemic. And so if you would like to sign up for our trainings this week, weekdays between 9 to 5.
All right, great. And we also have it in Spanish, the information available. We'll just leave that up here for a few seconds so that our viewers can take a look, and they can, get this information to their Spanish-speaking neighbors, family, or friends, so that they know that Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation has services available in both English and Spanish. Do you offer services in any other languages or just English and Spanish?
Primarily English and Spanish. We do have a couple of staff who speak French, and so we are able to serve those. And then we use the language lines if we come across clients who have other particular language needs. But the bulk of our clients are Spanish speakers.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for that. So, we're now in the week of Thanksgiving. We're all trying to plan out what Thursday is going to look like. I would love to hear from you guys about what are you guys planning for Thanksgiving? How is it going to look like for your families? But also, what are your organizations, telling your participants, your clients, the community in terms of how they should handle the holiday? Aldrin, you can start if you'd like.
I don't deviate too much from what Dr. Fauci says. If Dr. Fauci says keep it to 10 people, I keep it to 10 people. If he says keep it to 8, I keep it to 8. Or Dr. Gupta, I follow the science. So Thanksgiving is going to just be the nuclear family, with the addition of like one or two folks who may or may not be close to their family. We'll try to be as safe as we can be. But, this, I think everybody in New York City who's been through COVID here between March and June has heard enough ambulance sirens, have seen enough refrigeration trucks, and has seen or heard enough stories of leaving loved ones in the hospital, and because of the contagious nature of the disease, you cannot be with them. To know that this is not a hoax, this is not fake news, this is very real, and it's a growing danger. So I'm going to heed the words of the medical professionals and the public health experts and really keep it down to less than 10 people.
We're doing the same. We're doing the same in my house. We're keeping it. Actually, I think we are at 10, and it's like no more. No one else can come over. So I already had COVID back in March, but I still am very safe. I wear my mask. I keep my social distance. And even though I'm out and about in the community, I recognize how important it is to role model this and how important it is to support community members. So part of what we do during our food pantries is that we make sure that people are, maintaining their 6 feet distance from each other, that we give masks. You'd be surprised how many people don't have the funds to purchase a mask or walk around with ones that they've used for a couple of days. And so we make sure that we provide masks, and we provide information on testing sites, and that, anything that's available to inform our community members about COVID, we make sure that we do it as well. But yes, we will be keeping it safe in my house as well.
That's great. Yeah, me and my family, we've been having, a lot of conversations over the last several weeks about what we were planning. Even though for me, it was always like, let's just stay with the folks who we live with, and not really open it up to others. It really was a process for all of the extended family to really get there to that point. I would say that some of my family members were not thinking that way maybe like 2 weeks ago. And so, it has required to have a lot of conversation. But I also want to say that, like, I think after the election and things have changed and shifted, that we're hearing right from Dr. Fauci and the CDC, and people are really strongly encouraging folks to keep events small. And I think that also as people are seeing things like the public schools shutting down in New York City, and seeing other cities also starting to do like some shelter in place sort of policies, that people are really starting, to pay attention. And, and it's tough, right? Because I think, there's people who really yearn to be with their family members, but, we want everybody to stay as healthy as possible, especially as numbers are going up and we're seeing, less hospital beds available. And it is, a real burden on our healthcare system. So, I really want to put that message out there, to let folks know, keep it safe, keep it small. And, we're hoping, that over time, all of these things will change and shift for us, and that we'll be able, to get back together. But, bringing it back to the importance of our community organizations. So next Tuesday is Giving Tuesday. So, Maria, do you guys have, and the other thing that I also really love that has happened throughout all of this is virtual galas. I love virtual galas. I've been able to go to a few and some that I've never been to, and I was able to participate. And I think it's also a great way to connect with people and get people to give. Can you tell us a little bit about NYMIC and opportunities of being able to give to Northern Manhattan?
Sure. So you can give to NYMIC anytime you want. We accept donations 365 days of the year. So please feel free. But seriously, now more than ever, our community members and our neighbors need us. I mean, I see I look into their eyes when they come, and some of them are embarrassed. For some of them, this is the first time they've ever had to be on a food pantry line. And it's 2020. Hunger should not be an issue in New York City, in the United States, anywhere in the world. This should not be an issue. We should not be talking about hunger. And so I implore you, if you can do without a little something, if you could do without your $5 coffee every day for that week, you donate $25. You can support a food pantry distribution for one family. And so whatever you can donate any time of the year, please feel free to do so. Because like I said, our neighbors need us now more than ever. And if government is not going to be able to support the critical services that we provide as they should, then we're going to rely on everyone else, And this is a call also to foundations, to donors, to corporations, that, you need to be flexible. Because who would have thought that we would be going through a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic in 2020, where hunger would be key, would be central to what families are facing.
Thank you, Maria. Aldrin, you'd like to touch on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, this is a time where you don't give, from what you have extra. You give from what you got. Because if you wait around for what you got extra, you're never going to give. This is a time to give in abundance. This is a time to give early and often, because thereby by the grace of God, you, right? If you're not positioned to give, that means that many things are working really well for you in terms of, in relative to everyone else who has had a combination of crises before them. So I think that, give to organizations, also give of your time, right? Give of your time, give of yourself, safely at a social distance, whatever you feel comfortable with. But this is a time, these are not times that's good for people who want to like help people a lot, because mentally you could be strained and financially you could be really almost put yourself in bankruptcy because there's so much need out there. I mean, everywhere you turn, the need is substantial. And the worst thing is, you see things where you give, like monies, and I think you started to show with this, Raquel, that resources and funding for the undocumented
Yep.
are scarce to come by. But when we see these pots of money, sometimes you're thinking, all right, there's a $500, maybe even $1,000 to undocumented, and the first thing they go is just to pay some of their bills, like their Con Ed or their cell phone, and that's not exactly what it is you kind of thought the money should be used for, because they're paying multinational corporations, but they do need these services. So this is a time where we have to really impress upon the corporate America that they can't be cutting people's services off. They can't be nickel and diming people that are already so vulnerable.
Yeah.
The needs are just so great, and I will also say that keep a lookout as well for the elderly,
Yeah.
right? The seniors who are isolated. And because seniors that are isolated and the elderly, they may need something as simple as they've just come to your food pantry and you've given them certain bottles and certain things, but they can't open the bottle up. They can't open the food can up. It could be as simple as that. Like seniors need someone to check in on them on the most basic of things. And then keep an eye open or ear open or open heart. And this is the most difficult thing to help out in any, right? The most difficult stuff to help is when people have mental illness or chemical addiction. And during this time period of COVID, I cannot tell you how much my heart goes out to the parents, the family members, the children of people right now in the thralls of grappling with mental illness and chemical addiction, both or either or. And, as a society, we're like barbaric when it comes to dealing with those two very delicate social, illnesses, that we have. And so I would say just, give and give, not out of, what you have extra, but give from what you got,
Yeah.
period.
So let's talk a little bit about those who have, right? Because there's been a lot of talk about billionaires and people who have profited off of this pandemic. I know there are several leaders, elected officials in New York and throughout the country that have been calling on, putting a tax on the rich that would really help support, right, all of this work and all of the services that are needed to keep the city running. I would like to hear, your thoughts on that. And, do you see any likelihood of this being explored, in the next year? And with the new president, we're going to have folks running for political office next year. Eventually, we're going to have a new mayor, a totally, completely new city council in New York. Will this really be on the table? Maria, you'd like to comment?
Sure. I mean, I think it really will be on the table. Like Aldrin pointed out, with losing 45 billion from the tourism industry, we have to get income and money into the city somehow. And it's not going to magically appear. And so we do have to look at different options in terms of how do we raise revenue. And one way it is to tax those who have more, to tax those who have made even more money during this pandemic, as others have lost their jobs, lost, opportunities. And so definitely, I think now that we also have a supermajority at the New York State Senate, I think there will be more conversations around this, because the governor has not been open to taxing the rich out of fear that they will leave New York. But I think definitely this will be on the table, and there will be a lot more conversations about it.
Great. Aldrin?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Part of it is optics, but I'm not sure what the reluctance is to tax the wealthy at the appropriate tax code, right, at the appropriate level. Just today, the Dow Jones passed 30,000, which it's a historic first. And you have people who've made billions, like into the multiples of billions during the last 8 months. So, for many people, what we've undergone through COVID has been very lucrative, right? It's been very lucrative, very profitable. Um, that's kind of like, I wouldn't say blood money or ill-gotten gains, but it's certainly profits made possible through a lot of suffering. So I think that those entities need to be taxed appropriately and at a percentage higher than the working and middle class in terms of percent. And even doing so moderately, which the Biden administration has some goodwill, I think, and runway to do that moderately, would raise billions of dollars, even if you put it back to what it was the pre-Trump cuts for the wealthy, which is weird because it's a tax cut that the wealthy didn't ask for and one which they don't need. Um, they really don't. I mean, this uber wealthy really don't need a second helicopter or seventh house. I mean, this is based on like what they say.
Yeah.
That there's only a certain like 60, 70 billion or 40 billion might be okay, right? Like that the next 10 billion is kind of grotesque. Right?
Yeah.
There's only so much clothing, so much creature comfort you can have. That's just the reality.
I mean, the
that's
thing
just a
is,
reality.
the challenge will be, right, as we've seen with the presidential election, is how to have this conversation in a way where, right, we talk about fairness, we talk about compassion, we talk about empathy, of caring for our neighbors. And it doesn't become like this debate about socialism, right? Because I think, like what I have seen, especially in places like in the South, where that soundbite, really scares people off, and when you start talking about, right, taking from the wealthy to give to the poor, like immediately, right, antennas go up. And there's always such a push like around, the idea and the notions of capitalism and freedom, and people should do what they want with their money, right? And this is where we need to all understand, like, this is the role of government, right? This is the role of, when we're looking at governing, a people, right, and how we're going to care for people, especially in a situation like this during a pandemic. How can we have this debate in a way that it's not going to become even more polarizing than what we are experiencing, which, Aldrin, right, you also alluded to when we first started talking about this polarized country that we have.
I mean, definitely, but it's also about how do we also treat people with dignity, and I go back to our food pantry lines, and being able to treat people during some of the most difficult times with dignity and respect. Because today it is that person, but tomorrow it could be me. Tomorrow I could be the one that falls on hard times and I need to be on a food pantry line. And so I think we need to remember that as we're having these conversations, in a polarized nation, tax the rich to give to the poor. No, it's tax the rich because they have more, so we can continue to build our country and make sure that everyone has a chance, a chance at good education, a chance to, pull themselves up by the bootstraps and make it just like you did. But they need that opportunity, and you have a responsibility to invest in that. You have a responsibility to invest in your community, in your neighborhood, in your neighbor. You have that responsibility.
Aldrin?
And I think, I mean, look, I and I've been hearing a lot about the socialism thing, and I get it, but it's a remarkable flipping of it, right? If there's any corporate welfare or corporate socialism or welfare, it's on the corporate end. I mean, you've been looking at a systemic and long-standing redistribution of wealth, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. I mean, the working class, labor, middle class have been fleeced in a way in the last 30 years like never before. And the tax code that the rich are benefiting from wasn't one that they even had in place during Reagan. So let's say you like Reagan. Let's say you like Reagan's conservatism. Let's say he was the stalwart of the Republicans. So let's even go back to the tax rate that the rich had there at like 35%. I mean, it's gone down to like 21%. It's obscene. It's obscene. It's grotesque. And if there's anything remotely close to socialism, it's that, right? When you have a tax code where the wealthy can stop their taxes from going into the public coffers for like law enforcement, for teachers, for sanitation, because they want their philanthropy, right? They want to say, all right, I want to give 20 million. I want a building named after me, but then I don't want that money I want that to get that tax break from the tax code. So now you're getting your building named after you. You're like a philanthropist. Maybe your children now you have stuff into perpetuity, right? You have a legacy. But what makes you think that we couldn't have done the same as government or as the public sector with that money? How do you pay your taxes appropriately? So it's a real like switch of the cards to make us think that, Marco Rubio, the other day was like, well, China, we don't want to compete with China. We want, all the trade to be done here and we have to subsidize it here. Well, that's a form of socialism. That's a form of protectionism that's benefiting thing. And who's to say it's good, bad, or indifferent? I mean, you want to help the population, and in this country, we've had a history of a tax structure that hasn't, it's been the most regressive now that it's been in the history of this country. I mean, this country's tax code, you can't bring it down any lower without the federal deficits just being so ridiculously high that the dollar will be so weakened and that foreign money will be controlling interests of this nation and that we will not be credit worthy on the international global markets. I mean, the Republicans and conservatives will be worried about federal deficits and deficit spending. But now when it comes to just giving the money away in rich tax breaks, it's unbelievable. And I think there's a real stomach for people to rise up. For people who voted for both, right? There was a lot of similarity between Bernie Sanders and a lot of the Trump people. You gotta find common ground where you can find it. I don't have appetite for that anti-Semitic, racist, xenophobic. I don't have an appetite for that. But in terms of people catching a bad break in the U.S., multiple communities have been catching a bad break over the decades.
Well, I want to thank you. We have talked about everything from supporting our local community organizations to the city and the state budget to how do our budgets really reflect our values and what we care about and the people. And I really want to thank you, Aldrin and Maria, for joining me today. This information was, I hope, helpful to our viewers and to our audience. We are here. Please make sure if you are able to give, please give during this season. If you are in need, we have information here on food pantries, and you can always contact Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. Again, thank you. Thank you, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, for all of your work that you do in helping inform the public, especially during this pandemic. Thank you to Zenaida Mendez, our executive producer, and Freddie Pinto, our supervisor at the studio, for all of your work that you put in. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. You,